Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to the Swedes lesson video. And today I wanted to do something a little different and talk about breaking out of ruts. And yeah, it's a bit of a rainy day here, and I figured let's talk about something different without the instrument, kind of stepping away from it, to kind of touch on a concept and something that's really quite universal for many people, no matter their skill level, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, or a professional musician. At some point or the other, we'll always run into a rut. And it's just inevitable, and I think this is something any artist, creative person, or just person, human, in general should really kind of think about when things get stale, and probably something to, keep in mind. So I wanted to tackle a couple things, probably what makes a rut, what actually causes us to get into a rut, and a couple of ways to kind of break out of it. And feel free to grab a coffee, cup of tea, drink, whatever you want, and just sit back and relax and join in the discussion. So getting into it, what is a rut? Well, it's kind of when we get stuck in the same cycle, an endless loop, or a familiar habit. So then we have to take a step from that and figure out what is this habit, what causes the rut. And usually what I've noticed is it's maybe that we've taken an idea that we like, or something that we love, and we just keep recycling it over and over and over and over again to the point that we get sick of it. Let's take a macro perspective and look at life. It's doing the same thing over again, the same routine over and over again, going to the same places, sometimes seeing the same people, if it's even just something as minute as eating the same thing all the time, that turns into a rut, and it turns into a habit that we maybe get a little tired of, simply because we as humans, we need a little variety. Depending on who you are, you might need more, you might need less, but at the end of the day, you need some variety in your life. And this is something that plagues us as musicians, because, we can get a little obsessive, we can work on a concept, or something captures our imagination, we want to continue working on it. The downside is that eventually we probably start playing the same ideas, or doing this and doing that. And there are two things for a rut. First is, if it's just kind of like, I'm playing the same stuff all the time, then one is kind of just being a little easier on yourself, or one solution is just being a little easier on yourself and realizing that if it's something that's been in your playing for years, it's probably a part of you or something that comes out in your playing. So it's quite natural, and much like people have certain speech patterns or cadences or turns of phrase or things they say, and we recognize them for those things, right? People can recognize you for certain melodic devices, or certain chords, or certain harmonic movements, a sound. Dog's really excited, I guess. Must be going for a walk. I think so. Anyway, much how people get recognized for certain things, musicians get recognized for very specific things, So that's one. But then if it's a rut, like, I feel like I really am playing the same thing, and there are some things that have to be changed, well, we can get into a couple of ways you can break out of a rut. So the first thing I would say is go to extremes. And what do I mean by go to extremes? I don't mean like suddenly, if you're a rock musician, go and study classical music or jazz or something totally out of left field, or suddenly become a reggae guitar player, or if you're a jazz guy, totally ditching your instrument and picking up something new. I mean, go to an extreme within a certain idea. For example, let's say, this is a really big one actually, let's say you've been playing inside a lot, inside the tonality, inside the harmony. Try experiment for a certain period of time to stretch the harmony, to maybe play the upper structure, or completely avoid the harmony. Or vice versa. If you've been trying a lot of outside concepts, you're going to have to return to playing inside at some point, and you might find it very refreshing. In essence, it's basically a limitation exercise, which I'm going to put a card to up here because I did a separate video on what a limitation exercise is. The other thing we can do is, okay, let's take another variable. Let's say we've been playing a little too loose. This is actually a common issue. Avoiding the time, or floating over the time, or just playing sheets of sound, basically. And not really commenting on the time, that in and of itself can be stale. So go the opposite direction and figure out, how does it feel to play in time for a while? Stick to a groove, right? Or really, let's say if you're not playing, like if you're doing that, try to feel what it feels like to swing as hard as you can for an extended period of time. And I think it's important to state with this aspect, or this solution, is the result isn't the end goal. It's kind of the journey. I know it's a cliche, but it's about the journey, not the end result. The end result might be something totally undesirable, right? For example, especially if you're playing inside, playing extremely outside might be really not your cup of tea. It might be something that you want to avoid, right? But it can expand your ears and your hearing so that these ideas become accessible. Or, you know, if you're used to playing lines for so long and you're just going whatever it may be, whatever contour, play melodies instead and try force yourself to completely avoid what you're used to doing. And you'll find you'll be shifting into an uncomfortable space, or somewhere that is just comfortable enough that you can handle it, but uncharted territory, and you're kind of figuring out your way around it. So that's one thing you can do. The next thing you can do is just tackle creative solutions to a problem. And this can be in the case of, let's say you've been playing the same musical idea over and over again. Much like a kid learns a new word, they repeat the word incessantly, much to the chagrin and frustration of any adult around them. They start repeating the word endlessly, and you're just thinking, my God, when are they going to stop? And the same thing can happen to us as musicians. We get fascinated with a phrase or an idea or a piece of language, and we've just parroted it over and over again without really turning it into language. After all, what is language? Language is something we can manipulate. Language is something that we can tweak and use at will, not something that we recycle. So let's say I take an idea. What if I played, it's normally an ascending idea. I can play it descending. I can play it ascending and descending. What if I change the contour? Goes up a bit, down a bit, up a bit, down a bit, and then ascends to a peak or a high note. Let's say it's like a 3-1-3 idea, or something that has a very specific fingering to it. What if I changed the fingering? Instead of doing 1-2-4 on that, what if I did 1-4-2 or 4-1-2 or 4-2-1? Experiment with permutations. What if I look at the line and say, okay, there's a lot of conjunct movement or stepwise motion, and then there's a leap. Like do do o be, right? 1 2 3 5. Or bo do de do de do de. Like that's a common line I use a lot. So then what if I change the structure and I make all of my stepwise motions or my stepwise movements move by a leap? Or I say, okay, one stays stepwise, but then this one has to be a leap. And then my leap turns into a step. Things like that. You just start playing around with an idea. What if I change some of these fingerings around? What if I look at my existing pattern and look at it as a whole instead of every individual note? And then go, what if I tried jumping around from one note to the next? So let's take that idea. Do do de do de do de. What if I did do de do de do bo de do do? Right? That's a different idea. And that's quite an interesting one. Or I can take small ideas and turn them into wide intervals. Wide intervals turn them into stepwise ideas. Play around with an extreme of an idea. And again, are you going to use all of these ideas? The likelihood is probably not. Are you going to find some that are interesting? Probably. And if one captures your interest or your imagination, really explore that to its limit, and you might find a new idea that leads you somewhere else. The same thing can be said for rhythm. Let's say, let's take an example of a group of 7, right? The kind of stereotypical 7 clave that we always see, or that's kind of been always present in jazz or contemporary music. I'm sure we can think of many examples. So it's a group of 2 and a subdivided 3, like a dotted eighth. Right? Group of 7. What if I expand it? So I'm doing a group of 4 and a group of 3. I'm going to put the card to the odd time thing if you want to explore that a little more. I'm just going to link to a couple of other videos that might help in the general process of breaking out of a rut. But, for example, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. What if I do that as 2, 2, 3? Right? What if I change it around? So I do 3, 4. What if I do 3, 2, 2? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. What if I do 2, 3, 2? This is going to be an interesting one. Right? I'm suddenly looking at this from a different lens. What if I put that 7 against a group of 4? What if I do it against 3? Right? What if I take these and come up with a groove against that? That leads me in down a very different path. Take an idea, experiment with it, and go in any direction you please. Now the last thing I want to cover is quite a simple one. You don't need an instrument, you don't need to do anything musical, per se, you don't need to practice or do anything. It's simply just listening. You need your laptop, CD player, if you still use CDs, or sadly. It's kind of sad how the CD player has slowly been phased out of technology. Like my laptop doesn't even have a CD drive in it. But anyway, whatever you use to listen to your source of music, phone, laptop, whatever it may be, computer, and you can either go, let's refer to this as, you can go back to a certain place in your development, or you can move forward. If you move forward, this means you're looking for something new, something you've never listened to before, or is kind of loosely related to something that you've heard, but you've never heard it before. Or you can go further back, and go back to somewhere that inspires you, and this usually serves for 2 different purposes. I found some people get in ruts and get kind of depressed and start thinking, man, like I've kind of lost my spark, I've lost my drive, I've lost this thing that makes me happy about music, which is really sad. So I would say to those people, maybe go back to something you loved. Could be from when you were a kid, when you were just starting, something that really made you want to practice and kind of lit a fire in you, so to speak. Go check out that stuff and get back in touch with it. Or I would say go back if you need to cover some foundations that you might have missed, and go back to it with a new lens. Moving forward means finding something that you really haven't heard. Maybe, let's say, you're rhythmically floaty, and this is something I had to do like a few years back. Go find music that's rhythmically driven, and then really start listening to that a lot, or where rhythm is the focus. Or let's say you want to develop your sense of harmony. Go listen to music where harmony is the focus. Let's say you want to learn how to write a good song. Go check out the great songwriters, or great songwriters you've never heard of. If you want to learn, or you see where I'm going with this. Think of something that you would like and you wish was in your playing and your composing, and go study it, but by immersing yourself in it, by listening to it. And for example, I'm going to give you an example that happened to me just a few days ago. So just a few days ago, I think it was Tuesday, I uploaded a take on Francisca. Francisca's been a tune that's always kind of floated around in my musical upbringing of sorts for the past few years, probably since 2014 or so. And I discovered Francisca through Nelson Dhas, who was just shown to me by a teacher of mine. So then recently I was just bored one day and I was looking up Jesse Van Ruler videos and I found a video of him playing Francisca. And that reminded me of the tune, so I went to go check out Nelson Veras's versions. And that led me back to the original Toninho Horta. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to learn this tune. I've spent so long just hearing the tune, hearing the melody in my head, but I've never got around to learning it for whatever reason. So I just decided to go learn the tune. That brought up some interesting stuff that maybe I hadn't played before, or maybe I had, or it maybe made some stuff I recognized. It turned it into a concrete thing. Then that led me down another path of listening to more of Toninho's music again. It's something I come back around to. Or listening to these older versions of that I was familiar with, like Nelson's versions, and finding new things every single time. A musician I have to do this a lot with, I was doing this today actually, was Tribal Tech. I haven't heard Tribal Tech in a very long time, not in a few years, but they are one of my favorite bands, and I just kept finding new things, like, for example, how Kirk tunes his drums, or how his snare is tuned and kind of the sound it produces, or how Gary's really driving some of the bass movement, or how Scott's development, stuff that I'd never paid attention to before, or maybe I had, but it was kind of passive. You start getting new ideas from that. And then you think, what if I thought that way as a composer, or as a guitar player, as a writer? You see what I mean? This starts kind of breaking you out of that rut, but you've gone back and tried to figure out something that was important to you. I have to do this with Alan Holdsworth's music a lot. Like I deliberately don't listen to it as much because I find myself very easily influenced by it. I listen to it for a significant period of time, and very suddenly I start sounding like Alan. So what I try and do is step away from it for periods of time, although inevitably I will come back to it. But in doing so, I find something new, or I find like, I really like how Tony Williams or Vinny played on this tune. Or I love Gary Novak, the Gary Novak pairing with Alan. I start finding things I really like about that music. Or I love Alan's melodicism in this. I'm going to keep that in mind. Or I love how he developed something. Or I love a specific sound he used. Or an effect. Not an effect as in like an actual stomp box, I mean an effect as in like for example, hitting minor second and then leaning into it with the volume pedal. Like, I love that sound. So I thought, maybe I can use that in some way. So all in all, I hope this lesson's actually helped a lot of people. It's not so much a lesson so much as it is a perspective or just a chat. And I hope it's given a couple of people insight as to maybe how to break out of a rut, or how to do something that is a little different, or how to find that thing that you loved in case you lost it, or to explore uncharted territory. So I hope this lesson was useful for you guys. Please do let me know in the comments if it helped you out, or if you have any lesson topics you'd like me to cover, or any discussion topics. I'm happy to do some away from the guitar. And I will see you in next week's video. Until then, take care, guys.